All right, Mr. David Dusek, welcome to the Wolf and Iron podcast. Great to have you here, man.
Hey, Mike. Thanks, man.
So I've been following along with you for a while, and you're one of those guys that I see and I go, okay, we're of a like mind because you do a lot of stuff with movies and you kind of think in that way, very, very visual, storytelling. But I've also noticed that you've got a different approach to just your whole ministry. And just how you do it different than I go about things. And so I like to connect with guys that I think like I could learn from this guy. If I had a little bit of his brain, things would operate differently over in my side of the world. And, so I know you do a lot of speaking and things of that nature. So I'm selfishly going to use this podcast opportunity as kind of a get to know you, just sort of meeting for myself. I feel like we can just riff on a lot of things because we're in the same vein there and helping men be better men.
Absolutely.
So for the guys who don't know you, they don't know your background, just give us an introduction to who you are, what you do, all that kind of stuff.
Well, my name is David. Last name's Dusek. I'm the founder and executive director of Rough Cut Men Ministries. We use Hollywood action movies as our primary vehicle they're almost parables in a way, to connect men together in authentic, transparent, battle-ready brotherhood. Started the ministry back in 2009, joyfully married to Joni, my wife. We have 5 kids ranging from, they all click up one year over the summer. But we'll just say that they're 30 down to 24. We have 2 girls, 3 boys, 2 grandkids. Florida, I'm one of the only guys you will meet on the planet that's over the age of 50 with a Florida birth certificate. I didn't move to Florida. I was actually born and raised right here in North Florida. I live in Sarasota, which is the Tampa Bay metro area. I travel about 100 to 120 days a year when it's not 2020. And I speak all over the world. So I've spoken in Australia, New Zealand, the United States. I hit my 50th state in early 2020, right before everything got shut down. I went to Alaska and I did a men's retreat up in the Kenai Peninsula in February. I don't know what Florida boy would want to be in Alaska in February. But I'm an author and a speaker and a video content creator. And if you ever remember the old Office Depot commercial where there was, the guy named Dave who just did everything, that's me. We look a lot bigger on the internet, but there's just one of me posting all of our social media content, booking all the travel, doing all the speaking. My wife is my helpmate on the creative side, but as far as the execution, it's all me. Spoken to over 1 million men at this point. I do work with the U.S. Army extensively, so I've been pretty much to every United States Army post you could name in the States, and most of them overseas, Korea, Germany. Been all over the place with them. Also, I've done some work with Joe Gibbs Racing and out of Charlotte, North Carolina. So I've kind of crossed over. Men are men, man. It doesn't matter whether you're what uniform you wear or what you do for work. We all deal with the same issues, the same struggles, and most of us are isolated. And that's really the whole purpose of Rough Cut Men, is to de-isolate guys and get them connected and against this enemy that the Bible says in John 10 wants to steal, kill, and destroy.
No, I love that. And I wrote a little note there to kind of come back to the isolation piece. I love the fact that you said that we look a lot bigger on the internet than we, are in real life. And for the guys who, maybe you're thinking about starting a ministry or you've got a business or something like that, and you see, all this content and things being created and things being done, and you go, well, I can't put together a team. I can't afford all the whatever it takes. Look, if you got the ability to just grind it out and to do the work and to get really good at being efficient with your time, you'll be amazed at the amount of stuff that you can create that looks like what a team would do. Probably should take a team. But
and honestly too, Mike, staying in your lane is the most important thing. God created each one of us to do something different. Mm-hmm. So we're all different parts of the body, and I have learned when to say no, which has been really liberating for me, because at one point I was trying to be all things to all people. Yeah. I know where God has me placed, and I stay as tight and consistent in that lane as I can, or I'll refer to somebody else, because you can overwork and really get beyond your level of incompetence in a lot of respects, end up doing things that you're just, it's not your role. Yeah. And so I've learned a lot as, you become the tip of the spear in what you've been called to do. And then you just refine that mission until you have a laser focus.
So, kind of a bit of an aside here. So you're in Florida. You're familiar with Florida. You probably are familiar with the 30A region. Is that right? The Strip, 30A. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
No? Okay, so good. So actually, I feel better because I had never heard about this. So you know the Truman Show. You're a movie guy, so you've probably seen the Truman Show, or you know the movie.
Many times.
Okay, so that town, it exists. The town that they filmed it in was actually created in the 80s. It's off of a strip called 30A, which I guess stands for 30 alternate.
It's got to be up in the Panhandle.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Peninsula guys never go in the Panhandle, so I don't even know what's up there. I know Tallahassee's there, but that's about it.
Yep. And so there's this strip about 30 miles long. It's just basically, it's on the Panhandle, so it's a very kind of narrow strip there. But the little town's actually called Seaside, but all of the Truman Show stuff was filmed there, and that town looks exactly like it does. And it's just, it's fantastic. So my wife and I discovered that this was even a thing. And we were like, oh my gosh, like this exists. So we went down there literally about two and a half weeks ago and spent about a week down in that area, but all along that 30A strip. And this is for the guys who are thinking about vacations. You're going to sound like an absolute genius when you suggest this to your wife, because she's going to be like, wow, this is great. There's all these little villages that are kind of like that. They're just unique all along that 30A strip. So probably the quaintest area I've ever been in Florida. We love Tampa. We love that area, but this was just so nice. No condos, nothing like that. It was just really nice.
Wow.
So go check it out, guys, if you haven't.
Might have to make a run up there. It's only 7 hours away.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you didn't actually grow up Christian. Is that right?
No, I met the Lord in my 30s, very early 30s. I'm 56 now. Met the Lord in my early 30s when my marriage imploded. I had lost my home and my then wife and my two, at that point, very small kids. We're a blended family, so 3 are hers and 2 are mine. And I met the Lord at the top of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, which is a bridge that goes between St. Petersburg and Bradenton, Sarasota area where I live. If you guys have ever seen the 9-man bungee jump where the cord snapped, that was the bridge that they did that that epic fail on. And I cried out to God at the top of the bridge, and I said, God, if you were real, this would be a great time to show up. And so many people throughout my life had been sowing into me saying, you need Jesus, you need this, you need that. And you just don't know how much you need Jesus until he's pretty much all you've got. And that's where I was. I had stuff in my trunk. I just had to short sell my house, lost everybody. They moved to Seattle, where my ex-wife was originally from. And I drove down the other side of new creation in Christ. I mean, I was literally baptized in the Gulf of Mexico within weeks.
Wow.
In ministry within a couple of years. And the coolest part about the whole thing is the fact that every time I fly anywhere, which is a lot, I have to drive over that same bridge to go to the airport. So God reminds me every time I go over that bridge what he did for me on that, at the top of that bridge 20 plus years ago now.
So when you were crying out to God, did you have, how clear was your understanding of, I'm crying out to God, like as in Christian God, and and I need Jesus and all that kind of stuff. What was that? What was your kind of your mental position, your heart position in that? Is it just desperation or what?
I didn't have one. I mean, it was it was like crying for a life preserver when you're drowning. And that was we always tell folks that there is an inherent spot in the heart of every man and woman, but every man, I'm using man in the biblical sense of the word. Every person has a God spot in their heart that only God can fill. And, for years and years, you can throw any number of things, performance, money, drugs, alcohol, whatever you try to throw into that to fill that spot, but God will eventually take his rightful spot. So it's almost like we are inherently created to know that we have that spot and that there's really only one key that will fit into that particular hole. And that was God. So I don't think I didn't have a mentor. I honestly knew zero about anything Christianity when I cried out to God at the top of the bridge. And he sort of took over from there and gave me a hunger to spend time in the word, and started learning about major minor prophets, original languages, and all that deep Bible stuff that really proves to be useless in a lot of cases when I'm dealing with men who are struggling with, addiction, friendlessness, father wounding, all the stuff that plagues every guy you ever meet. So I honestly, Mike, I had no clue what I was doing. It was my last resort in a moment of just abject loss.
So how did you know then? I know I'm going to go back a couple of years here. But how did you know that that God was showing up or providing, like answering that prayer in some kind of way? I mean, did it happen like immediately on the bridge, and you're like, sense of peace, or was it like?
No, every hair on my arm stood up.
Wow.
I mean, every hair on my arm stood up, and I drove down the other side knowing that God existed. I mean, that was it, you know. And there wasn't somebody laying hands on me. Nobody led me to the Lord. God led me to Himself. I mean, just it was one of those, you know, wilderness moments. It's my Damascus, you know, because I was, I call him Dave. Dave was an abject Christian hater, devoted apologist to atheism, biochemistry major originally in college. And I always say Dave became a chalk line at the top of that bridge on that day. And David, a man after God's own heart, drove down the other side. And so I have a very dark past and a very light present. And the only difference between those two times, other than about 185 feet of bridge altitude, is God invading my life at that moment.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I know that there's some guy listening to this either that can relate to that or he can see himself either on old Dave's path and he's going, oh, geez. You know, and there's this sense, I know, because I felt it before in my own heart, even though I was saved at an early age, there's this sense in which I don't want to admit what I really ought to be doing. I really don't want to accept that that I need God, that I need to change my heart. I need something outside of myself to fix my situation. And so, you know, I know there's a guy listening to this right now. He's probably, you know, his marriage is in shambles. He can't be the man that he longs to be or wants to be. Sometimes doesn't even want to be that guy, but he knows it's the right thing to do. And he can kind of see maybe that there's a point where he's going to be on that bridge or on his own kind of, you know, proverbial bridge and in that same situation. So I think it's really great to have that perspective, because a lot of guys, it takes us really getting walloped in life, realizing that we can't do it on our own, to kind of go, geez, you know, I need a big change. And this change is something that I cannot manifest through my own work. You know what I mean?
No. And let me be on the flip side of that for the guys who are always telling idiots like Dave that they need Jesus. The first people that started to drop that bomb on me, I was probably 17. So, I mean, it took a good 15 years for me to finally get it. So, be faithful, continue to sow. Just because you're dropping seeds that look like they're ricocheting off of the dirt, I promise you there's going to come a moment in every person's life that you've spoken into where they say, you know what, that guy was right. I had in aviation, a near miss is coming within a half mile of another aircraft. And I had a lot of near misses with God where I could see the airplane, but you know, I had things to do. I'll get around to that. And he just continued to allow things to invade my life that left me with one logical alternative. But the only reason I knew God existed in the first place was because of all these people going back to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes guys on my track team and on the football team in high school that lived a different way that wasn't too appealing to a party animal like Dave, but they were right, you know. So just be faithful, guys, and continue to lead people to Jesus. Don't beat them upside the head with the word of God. You just love them, and they're going to come to a point where they say, you know what? He was right. I need this.
Yeah, that's good. So at what point then in your journey did you say, I really want to start giving back and helping men be better men, or I want to maybe fill a gap that the church as it isn't addressing with men, or something along those lines? Like, when did this rough cut men and all that kind of stuff start take off for you?
Well, I was selling homes. I was a home builder at the time. Relatively new believer, working for a Christian boss who ultimately became my battle buddy, my best friend, my accountability partner. But back then he was my boss. And the market in Florida sort of tanked. The real estate market floor fell out. And I went to him and I said, you know, I really feel like I need to do something about this ministry call. I just felt burdened, probably because my wife we're both, you know, divorced and remarried. So what she had come out of wasn't the spiritual leadership that she was craving. And so she had some basis of comparison, and I had the subject expert on what women need in a godly marriage. So I was able to kind of feed off of that. But I started doing training for Man in the Mirror out of Orlando. And I was nuts, man. I would drive all the way over to hear Pat Morley, who wrote the book, The Man in the Mirror, I think back in 1986. I would go over to his Bible study in Orlando, which is about 2 hours away from my house. Yeah. And I would literally drive there every Friday. I get up at 3:00 in the morning to be there on time for his Bible study. And I went through a leadership training with them and talked to Pat and said, I'd really like to do this leadership training. This is great. I can do this. I also had an abject fear of public speaking, which was comical given what I do now. Yeah. But at the time, I was mortified of microphones, didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I started doing these little regional trainings in Florida. I would just target an area, had the little 4-hour training, and I would go to the Miami Metro or Orlando or Jacksonville or in the state, and a guy came up to me from Dothan, Alabama, when I was up in Panama City, and he said, "Hey, I love the fact that you use your own failures as illustrations instead of saying, I have a friend who, or let me tell you a story about this guy. You were using your own screw ups to illustrate the principles in the training. And I'd love to have you come and do our retreat." And I said, "All right, man, I'm new in ministry." He said, "Honorarium, I'm down." And I'm on my way home. It's a 7-hour drive. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about for a whole weekend. I told my wife when I got home, I said, "I just signed on to speak at a 3-day retreat. I don't have a clue. I'm a 4-hour leadership trainer. I don't have any original anything." And she said, "Well, why don't you take all those movie clips that you've written down and just do something with those?" Yeah. I said, "Okay." So I went to Blockbuster. This is how long ago it was. I went to Blockbuster, rented all of the DVDs with the clips, went to my buddy's house. He was a TV producer for Fox Sports. He does fishing shows. And we ripped all the clips and sanitized them for language and content and burned them to a master DVD. And off I went to Dothan, Alabama to do this retreat for 3 days. And I literally made up all of the content in the middle. Oh, wow. I had bullets written down, and I still use those bullets 16 years later, almost 15 years later. They've been refined, obviously, as time has gone on. My kids have gone from being little to being adults and having their own kids. There's never a shortage of new material. Yeah. Because, when you got 5 kids, 2 grandkids, we have a special needs son. My ex-wife died in 2009 of colon cancer. She was just barely 40 years old when she passed away. So, I've been through a lot. I was a prodigal son. I've had a prodigal son. So I can speak into the lives of pretty much everybody. And that's when I abandoned the leadership training and went fully transparent with Rough Cut Men. And I get up there and I just open my trench coat and say, "Look, here's my mess." And it levels the playing field, because guys are tired of hearing someone get up on a platform and say, "Hey, I have a friend who, or let me tell you how you can be just like me, in a perfect," and that ain't the way it is. We're all struggling. And so that was, 08, 07, the genesis of Rough Cut Men becoming what it is. And obviously it's morphed into a book and a video series and a second book. It's kind of like in the last 15 years, it's like being on a roller coaster. You just get on, hold on to the handles. It's going to go where it goes. You can't steer it. Yeah. And the goal is to just not fly out. No, that's basically, that's how it worked.
Well, and I encourage any guy who's listening to this, whenever you meet somebody who's started something that you admire and you have the opportunity to ask them how they got started, you're going to be really impressed by what it takes to get something off the ground. How a lot of times they don't have all the pieces together. Like, he didn't know exactly what, I signed up I said yes to this, this 3-day engagement. I don't know what I'm going to do. There's that sort of pressure to come up with something, and then boom, something unique really comes out of that. And I know that's a God thing too, but you're going to see that common story among a lot of entrepreneurs and people who really feel a passion about something. Even the getting up at 3 a.m. to make sure you drive and, meet some guys that are 2 hours away. That kind of stuff, that's when you really, really want something, when you really have a passion and a drive to grow, that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like, I wish that maybe somehow something would come my way. No, you got to go get it. And I think be faithful about it, as you obviously were.
Well, I think being regimented is a huge deal also. I'm not type A, man. I'm type triple A. And my wife never wants to throw me off of she calls it my mojo. It's like, I don't want to throw you off your mojo, but can we, fit this in somewhere? Because I do the same things every day at the same time, and I put probably 80 to 90 hours a week into working either in or on the ministry, depending on the moment. I do a lot with, Jesus would leave the 99 to go after the one.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that a lot, both my wife and I. If someone's crying out, we'll drop everything and go talk to that one person. I've never looked at an event as a one-off. I always look at an event as a dress rehearsal for eternity, and I'm going to be friends with these guys forever.
Yeah.
And if they need me, that's why I give out my cell phone number. It's on my website. It's, I answer phone calls because it's important.
That's great. That's great. And that's actually a really good distinction between you and I as well, as far as the type A. I'm not. I don't know what the alternative to type A is, but when you are a creative individual that's kind of like boom, 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 and you have to really try hard to kind of structure yourself and stay in line with,
I'm married. Thing. I'm married to a creative. So Believe me, I know.
Yep. And that's on time. The way it goes. On
time for me is 15 minutes early. On time for her is when I get there.
Yep. So my wife and I are the opposite in that way. So we'd probably have a lot of things to talk about. So let me get here. See what I want to talk about. So why is it that, so you had kind of a collection of films that you really loved, and there was something about these films that really spoke to you. And then your wife was like, use these to maybe help kick off this ministry thing. Why is it that, that you went there? Whereas a lot of guys, and I think I know the answer to this, a lot of guys would have been, I got to open my Bible up. I got to start with a chapter and verse, and I got to, pull some stuff from here, and I can't deviate from that. And in fact, if I bring in secular movies, then, the church is going to be mad at me, or I'm doing something wrong. Why did you feel drawn to the movies that we all love?
Sure.
And kind of go that route?
Well, first of all, like I said before, men are men. We're visual. Most of us love, a good high-speed flyover, in Top Gun, and I just found these really unique vignettes in the middle of these movies. It's like, wow, that, with our special needs son, he tends to watch things over and over and over and over again. He's 26, but we went through a season of Karate Kid, and I found a great biblical illustration in Karate Kid. He was stuck on The Incredibles, the Disney Pixar, for a while. And The Incredibles, there's a dinner scene in The Incredibles that actually launched the ministry. That's what started the whole me writing down these movie clips. But I'm not all things to all people. And, there are some denominations that wouldn't have me walk through the front door because I wear an American flag on my hat. Mm-hmm. I'm just not their cup of tea. And that's okay, because I know that there are other guys that do ministry that are probably perfect for them. So I do a lot of discovery when I talk to people about coming to speak, to make sure that it's a good fit. I want, driving worship music. If you're going to do worship, it needs to be driving, because if you don't, you're going to kill me before I even get up on the platform. If you got a guy up there with an acoustic guitar singing The Old Rugged Cross without an amp, and then I'm going to put an F-14 Tomcat screaming by at Mach 2 on your screen, they're not going to vibe well. So I know that there are some guys that wouldn't be the least bit interested in what I'm doing, but I don't do chapter verse. For example, when it's a long story, but I'm not going to go into all of it. There was a point where when my ex-wife was diagnosed with cancer, my son decided that instead of living here with me in Florida, he was going to go be with his mom. And that night I purposed myself to go to my best friend's house and fight her on it. And I needed my wingman to go to court with me. And when I showed up at his house, instead of spitting nails, I just started crying like a 5-year-old little boy who just skinned his knee on the driveway. And he didn't know what was wrong. And he brought me in, sat me down, he had no idea what was going on, sat me down on a couch and threw a box of Kleenex and a bottle of water at me. And I just cried for like an hour. I was just devastated. This whole backstory of back and forth across the country. My kids had moved multiple times, and I thought God had finally restored my relationship with my son, and then poof, he takes him away again. But David sat silently for over an hour and could have said any number of things, but chose not to. And then I'll segue into the whole concept of Job and his 3 friends who completely threw him under the bus for some 32 chapters. But before they did that, I call them three typical church guys because they all had an opinion about why Job was struggling. But when they first found out what happened to their friend, the Bible says they traveled a very long distance to see him. When they saw him in the distance, they fell to the ground, tore their robes, threw dust on their head, the ultimate sign of repentance. And then when they got to him, they sat down in the dirt with him for 7 days and 7 nights and didn't say a word. You don't need to know that that's in Job 2 any more than you need to know that Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 4 that we should pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up.
Yeah.
When I go in front of a full brigade in the Army in what I would classify as unit friendly, meaning I cannot be overtly Christian, it's very easy for me to say, a wise man once said that we should pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. God promises that his word never returns to him void. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say you need to give him the address or even who said it or a page number. All they need to hear is the word.
Yep.
And I'm the same way with that. When I do a live Rough Cut Men event, there is no subordinating scripture that pops up on the screen. If you want to know where it is, I'll be happy to tell you. And I will, it'll fly out of my mouth at some point during the presentation. But at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. I mean, his word is important. Where it is, if you want to know, I'll be happy to tell you. And that's kind of the way we built this thing. So again, I'm not going to be preaching exegetically, line by line, through Paul's epistles in the original Greek. Not my thing. I'm there to rally the warfighters to defend their marriages, their communities, their church, and target the spiritual leaders with the same tactics that you would use in real world combat, only in spiritual warfare instead.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Kind of speaking of the spiritual warfare side of things, I think a lot of guys, especially Christian guys, will hear that we're under attack, and it should be obvious. Like if it's never been obvious before, it should be extremely obvious right now. Like in our nation, with everything that's going on with the Roe v. Wade overturning and how people are reacting, and even stuff before that, that there's a spiritual battle going on. But I think one of the challenges that we have is that it's difficult to see how real that is in our own lives versus like, somebody just dealing with trauma or woundedness or lost or whatever the case is. How do you address the spiritual side of things, the spiritual battle, or do you just say, hey, look, whether it's a spiritual issue or it's a more of a pragmatic issue, you address them the same way? What's your approach to that?
Well, I think it was John Eldredge that said everybody, every man has a desire to fight for something greater than himself.
Yeah.
And since I work with the Army so much, I'm able to create some pretty vivid illustrations of the infrastructure, the superstructure of our 1.2 million active duty reserve and National Guards soldiers. And I illustrate that drilling down from 500,000 down to a 2x2 cover formation and how you get there. And really, Mike, wars are won or lost at the fire team level. That's 4 guys in a Humvee. You got the driver, the comms guy, the guy in the right seat who's usually fire team lead. Mm-hmm. 4th guy's got his hands on a 50 cal sitting in a turret, making sure they don't get killed when they're outside the wire. And if you create that illustration for most men and say, look, every morning when you get up, you're not at home.
Yeah.
I believe it was Jesus was praying for his disciples. I think it's in John 17, where he says, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. Then he said, they are not of the world, even as I am not of it.
Yeah.
When we make that profession of faith, a supernatural transaction occurs where we surrender our birth certificate here on earth. At the top of that bridge, I became an eternal citizen of heaven. I'm going to be around the throne crying, holy, holy forever. And anyone listening who's made a profession of faith, you no longer belong here. Well, the textbook definition of a deployment is to be the citizen of another country on hostile ground, foreign soil, in a fight until that mission is over. When that mission is complete, you return home, you redeploy. And for us, that means that every morning when we get up, we're living in a forward operating base.
That's great.
This is not our home. And you do have an enemy that's sitting in the trees that wants to take out the man, because this enemy has figured out that if I take out the man, I can ruin the marriage, the kids, and the generational legacy that comes after him. One shot, multiple kill. So that's the way the enemy has always been targeting humanity, and that's the way the enemy is continuing to target humanity. And now he's using other people, other opinions, social media, even inside families. They're being pulled apart over something as inane as politics.
Yep.
If you spend more time focused on politics and focusing on the Bible, then you have an idol. And that's one of the things that I think guys just need to hear, because even some of my best friends are constantly posting about this, that, and the other thing politically.
Yeah.
And when you focus, whatever takes your focus off of Jesus is an idol. And I've watched a lot of my brothers in Christ falling prey to the news, the media, the narratives, the politics. Just let it go, man. God's bigger than all that. He's going to fight for us right on through to the very end. Look what he just did in the last week. He's done several pretty amazing things in terms of what we've been praying for. So he's still on the throne. This war is real. And one thing about it, if you think back to World War II, 1945, Hitler's losing ground. He's about done. An opposing force will not hold back anything when they know they're about to lose.
Yeah.
So the enemy right now is coming at us with everything he's got stored in his arsenal, because this is like the last fight. He's going to do whatever he can to debilitate as many believers as possible. And it's working in a lot of respects.
Yeah, it is. And one of the ways that you, as you kind of mentioned, that is working is through isolation. And it's strange that we have the ability to connect in greater ways than we've ever had before. And yet really true, meaningful connection is becoming less and less, especially among men. And I think I talked to some guys about this the other day, about how social media is, women are a lot more engaged on social media. I think they kind of gravitate to what social media is in terms of like making real connections with actual people. Girl, you look great in that dress, or, oh, your baby's so beautiful, or whatever, that kind of stuff, right? Whereas guys tend to, we're looking for that battle. And so that's where guys get engaged in the conflict of things, this political point, or this other political point, or this other thing that's going on. And they want to kind of manufacture or be a part, feel like they're part of the battle.
Right.
But, a lot of that still just ends up us talking about a bunch of junk that we can't control or have anything to do with. And it isolates us. It kind of removes us, because that's time that we could be spending connecting. So give me an idea of, because I know you got the speaking engagements and things like that. How do you get guys to connect? Like, what's the mode of operation, or what's the tactic that you use to really get guys to start connecting with one another?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's my just ridiculous transparency, because I think the transparency breeds transparency. And one of the things that kept me out of the church for a long time was my perception that church guys were perfect, but they were both perfect and absolutely no fun. Those were the two qualifiers to be a quote unquote, Bible thumping Jesus freak, or whatever I used to call them.
Right.
And that's far from the truth, because I mean, I've met a lot of guys that are just real dudes, that make beard oil, I mean, and stuff like that. I mean, that to me was exciting. That was captivating. So first, as a leader, as a pastor, as a men's leader, as a small group leader, as a coach, being transparent about your own shortcomings will level the ground, because it's all level at the foot of the cross anyway. And guys will realize, oh my gosh, man, this dude with a microphone in his hand is actually a bigger train wreck than I am. So it's okay. And then what I'll do is I will drop, I'll be very transparent. Then I'll drop a single laser pointed question into the middle of a small group. Because we have these little 4-man fire team breakouts throughout our live event. And you can talk or not. It's entirely up to you. But each question gets progressively deeper, because I think most men camp out at an inch deep, mile wide. We like it that way. We'll talk about the lightning. We'll give the universal man greeting, the head nod, the fist bump. But we have hundreds of acquaintances or thousands of Facebook friends, but no real friends. And that's a struggle. And systemically, since I didn't grow up in the church, I've noticed this systemically about the church, is we have created this, Saturday morning, first Saturday of every month, kind of burnt pancakes, 2 testimonies and a prayer, sort of a men's ministry. And we marked it off of our to-do list at our church. Like, yeah, we've got a men's ministry. We meet the first Saturday of every month for 45 minutes. And you're married. I'm married. I know my wife never would have, she wouldn't have had anything to do with me if I took her out once a month for 45 minutes over pancakes. I had to spend time with her because the more time is spent together, time develops trust. If there's no trust, if we don't spend time, there's not going to be any trust.
Yeah.
If there's no trust, there'll never be a relationship. And if there's no relationship, there'll never be discipleship, because, you can't do those things out of order. And that's where we fall short a lot, is we don't spend enough time together. So oftentimes I take the monkey off of the church's back at an event and I put it back squarely on the men. I create a desire that most men don't even know that they have, which is to be connected to other guys. And instead of meeting to do a 32-week study of the book of Revelation,
mm-hmm.
Go shooting, man, go fishing, go play golf, do whatever it is you like to do. Take somebody with you, because the conversation organically will go from how about them lightning, or how about them gators, to I think my wife really hates me and I don't know what I'm going to do about it. Nothing changes between two guys. I mean, they're still the same dudes doing the same stuff. The only difference is the time that they spend together. The more time we spend together, the more likely it is that we're going to be transparent. Women are the exact opposite. I mean, they'll go from zero to deep, like on the front porch, and they'd never met each other before, or in the aisle at the grocery store. We're not that way. We've been burned enough times. We have enough riding on it that we don't want to put ourselves out there, because, then we're showing weakness. But the dumbest soldier in the world goes out kicking doors without any overwatch. If you're by yourself, it's not a matter of if you're going to get shot in the back, it's when, because the enemy is looking for the guy that's by himself. In combat and in the world.
And, that temptation that guys need to be aware of is the thing inside you that says, yeah, I could call my buddy up, but I don't want to bother anybody. Or I could arrange something this weekend for the guys to go shooting, but, I don't know, I probably need to be home with the kids. Or, yeah, I could go talk to my neighbor, but, I don't want to really engage in that relationship. And it's our bandwidth is shrinking. And we're doing it because we say, well, I'd rather just go inside and chill, or watch Netflix, or watch whatever, on TV, and ignore other people. But we've got to be aware that it's a very, very dangerous thing that's ultimately going to lead to really just being a piss poor man, but also probably destruction in our family. And we need to kind of have that as a red flag in our own mind. Like, whenever I say I don't want to engage with my potential brothers out there, that's a red flag for us. So no, I need to engage.
Yeah.
That I need to, that's the enemy getting a foothold there.
And it takes intentionality. I mean, honestly, we have to, the easy road is always the alone road. I can binge watch Cobra Kai with the best of them. Most men won't initiate conversation, but they will respond to conversation.
Yeah.
One of my good friends, who I've known for a lot of years, is on my board also, lives up outside of Wire at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And he's one of the guys that was actually on the ground in Mogadishu in 1993. Now he's a government guy, does IT. It's like a GS-12 or some ridiculous. I mean, he's been at it forever.
Yeah.
And he lives on this little T street, like 30 miles north of the base of the post. And it's got these, big 1-acre lots with these huge homes on it. And I went up there to hang out with him. I did an event, and then I hung out with him for a little bit. And all these great houses with these guys that are out playing with their kids, and kids on bikes. I'm like, man, what a great neighborhood. There's only about 15 houses on this road.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I have all these guys over every Saturday. I invite them over. He goes, I go door to door, because he's the only believer, I think, on the street. He says, I invite them over and just make them food and just love on them. And he's very intentional about doing that all the time. And I said, well, that's crazy. What's the big deal about, I'm glad you're doing that, but what burdened your heart to reach out to the street? He goes, well, I want to be a good neighbor. And he goes, and also every one of these guys is an operator. So everybody on that street was Delta Force, but they don't have Army stickers. They don't wear uniforms. They got long hair. You can't even tell. Got to be the safest neighborhood on the planet, But he reaches out, and he has all these Delta Force guys who are notoriously isolated, and very unempathetic when it comes to relationship, to help them express their feelings. And guys don't normally want to do that. But if my buddy can get a bunch of Delta Force operators to show up and talk about marriage, I think pretty much any one of us can do that.
Yeah. No, that's
But
awesome.
we got to be intentional about it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's being intentional, because the opposite of intentionality today isn't that someone's going to come and rescue you from your situation or put you to work even. The opposite of that is a type of comfort that is kind of sickening and gross to to what we call manhood these days. And it's inviting and enticing, but like I said, it's going to worsen us over time. And so, we've got to be intentional about that with every aspect of life. And that's really one of the things that separates us in our day and age from, say, 150 years ago, maybe even 100 years ago, is that we actually have the ability to kind of live a very mundane life and disappear from society and kind of insulate ourselves and be isolated. And nobody's going to really challenge that. And in fact, there's going to be a lot of things out there vying for our attention because they want us isolated. They want a bit of our time. They want to sell us something. And so without that intentionality, we're going to be an absolute wreck.
Agreed.
So let's talk about some movies real quick.
Yeah.
In the last few years, has there been any movie that's kind of popped up at the top of the charts or in your own mind that you're like, that's awesome, even for just this one scene? Because I know you and I both we love movies, but there's been a lot of like woke narrative in movies.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And stuff is just garbage. I've got a couple of them in my mind, but I wanted to hear from you if there's anything new that's come out that you're like, yes.
Well, I'm an MCU junkie, so I absolutely love all things Marvel. And there's some great illustrations in Endgame as far as just battle ready brotherhood. But I honestly, the father wound is one that I really focus on. Actually, it's the soul wound, the words that people speak over us, the not knowing the real story, and how we pass that on generation to generation. My dad walked out on him when he was, I think, 9. And so that's a wound that my now 86-year-old father still carries. Yeah. Even today, he calls his biological father his sire, because he refuses to call him his biological dad. And to see that played out. But I mean, I saw a great illustration of not knowing what happened. Actually, movie over movie. If you start with Top Gun and you think about, Pete Mitchell, Maverick, not knowing what happened to his dad, whether he was on the right or wrong side of a line when he was shot down because it was classified, and then Goose hitting the canopy and then moving into the new Maverick movie and meeting his son, and that carry forward. There's some great stuff in that. There's a movie called Forever Strong, which is a real. If you haven't seen it, guys, you got to see it. It's about rugby, which is not a typically traditionally American sport, but it's really good. And it's got the actor McDonough, the guy who is in Band of Brothers and a bunch of other movies, but he's the coach. And it's got this really pronounced relational struggle between a father and a son. And it's very prodigal in the way that it's played out, because the son, is just off the rails. And the dad's off the rails because he got wounded when he was younger. And I love movies like that. So there's a lot of movies that come out that really focus on those. But I'm an old school movie guy. I love the brotherhood of Forrest and Bubba in Forrest Gump. And I've got a 36-second scene that you just love in that movie. There's great brotherhood stuff in the movie 300. There's a great story narrative in The Patriot. And I just like guys movies, so I'll sit down and watch anything. And of course, there's the staples that I'll watch 450 times in a row. Yep. There are no biblical lessons in A Few Good Men, but it's still one of my favorite movies of all time. And even if it's on, I'll watch it. Even if it's got commercials and I own it on DVD, I'll stop and watch the entire thing. What about you? What do you got?
Oh, yeah, big fan of the MCU. Well, the early MCU stuff. I mean, up to probably Endgame. Then it kind of got, Yeah,
it got weird.
Yeah, it got a little bit weird. But a lot of great moments in there. My favorite probably movie of all time, and a lot of guys haven't seen this one. Probably wouldn't even think about it being a movie that would really speak to the heart of men. But I think it's probably one of my favorite all time movies is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, the new one. Came out probably 2012.
I've seen that movie 150 times. I even have the soundtrack in my phone.
Same here.
I love that movie.
Yep, same. I went and picked up an old 91 Vanagon from Utah. So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I had that soundtrack going while I'm going around to the national parks and stuff, because it just spoke to that adventurer in me. And we watched it literally this weekend with my son again and some in-laws. And I just, every time I watch it, I see something different, there's just something different. I could pick that movie apart and just go, this scene. So much of it is just brilliant.
That movie makes me want to go to Iceland and Greenland really bad. Yeah. Every time. And I'm either going to get the red car or the blue car. I haven't figured out which one I'm going to get when I get there.
Well, it's funny because that's another scene where, just kind of geeking out about this. So he says we have two choices, basically. We have a red car or a blue one. And that's the same choice that Neo gets in the Matrix.
It absolutely is.
The blue pill or the red pill, and he chooses the red pill because he wants to know the truth. He wants to, to be aware. And that had to be intentional in the movie. So there's all that kind of stuff that pick up on. There's another movie that a lot of people haven't heard of that I really enjoyed, and it was to me, it was just really spoke to the heart, got me all teared up and stuff. Called Little Boy, and it came out maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
I think I've seen that one too. I don't remember it though.
The story is basically it's World War II. We're developing the atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, I think, and basically about this boy he's a really little kid, and his dad has to go fight in the war, and he befriends the boy befriends like a Japanese guy locally that's getting a lot of hate and stuff like that. And the boy and the acting and just the music and what he thinks about his dad, the way he loves his dad, that was just like, man, it was just so impactful. Plus it's just a really cool kind of war story, and that's that time period. The acting, everything's really well done. So those are really great. And I think that of course, the classics, Indiana Jones, fantastic.
Oh,
I was actually talking to Stephen Mansfield last week about this. One of the things I love about Indiana Jones, and we'll stop here at some point, but one of the things I love about Indiana Jones is, most hero movies nowadays, even a lot of the MCU stuff, the guys are kind of like a hapless idiot that end up becoming a hero somehow. They get bit by a spider or something happens to them, and we like them, but they're not looking for that, life.
Yeah.
It's usually the bad guy that's like seeking the treasure. It's the bad guy that's really on mission, just going all out to achieve something incredible. And whereas, with Indiana Jones, he's on mission as well, to fight against the bad guys. That's one of the reasons that I really enjoyed that, because he's a man's man kind of hero.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of guys are sort of in this mindset that like that adventurous battle is just going to sort of happen. It's just going to sort of come to me. And if I go pursue that, if I go pursue the career, the business, the lady, the whatever, then my ego's involved, and I'm more on that side of the evil guy, the bad guy. And I think we've got that mixed up, that, men, godly men, who have been equipped and gifted with something, they pursue it, they go after it, and they do that. And I think that's, it's one of the things that men need to learn these days. I think we need more movies that show men passionately pursuing things and being the hero still. So,
yeah, agreed.
All right, David. So I know you got a video series I want to talk to you about here as we kind of close out.
Sure.
You mentioned this a little bit as we were talking before we got started recording, and it just sounded awesome. So give me some updates on that. Tell me a little bit about how you guys put that together.
Well, we originally created this video series for the U.S. Army Chaplain Corps. It's called Who Has Your Six? We were going to call it Rough Cut Men, but it's gender specific, and the JAG Corps came at me when I was at Fort Campbell in Kentucky with the 101st Airborne Division and told me I couldn't call it that. So when we went to do the video series, it's the same content, we just changed the name. I always wanted to do a video series. The Army needed me to be in multiple spots at the same time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take the Rough Cut Men movie experience, live event content, and compartmentalize it into 20 or 30-minute videos. I think we can probably do 8 of them because we have 8 different clips that I really wanted to use. I sort of had the idea, but I had this grandiose idea of how I wanted to do a video series, because I had seen a lot of, Men's Fraternity 33, a lot of the stuff that is really impactful for men, but cinematically it's pretty monotonous, right? It's kind of boring. And Christian production companies are renowned until Sherwood came out and started doing things like Facing the Giants and Courageous and whatnot. The quality of Christian material has always been suspect. It's always been pretty low, shaky hand camera, low quality, terrible. So what we ultimately decided, I always wanted to do an on-location video series. I'm going to use my movie clips, but I didn't want the movie clip to be the axis of the whole video, which means I would have a live audience. I would stand there behind a podium and say, watch this clip, and then go to the movie clip, and then it would come back to me. Again, I'm a talking head. I'm boring. It's you go into beta sleep 5 minutes into it. It's not worth it. So I knew that if I was ever going to do a video series, I wanted to do it on location. And I already had the locations in my head. And God, in my opinion, it was in Ephesians 3:20, where God says he can do exceedingly abundantly beyond anything we can ask or imagine. Yeah. I had already thought I set the bar so high, there was no way that we could do any better. And then it just, we raised $250,000 with nothing more than an idea, went out and got a producer, interviewed several, found one that we just loved, because you got to love the guy if you're going to be traveling all over the place. Yeah. And then ultimately we created 8 25-minute videos with a PDF facilitator guide. The goal was get guys together 1 hour in and out. So you fist bump and fellowship for 5 minutes. You watch the video, then you got 30 minutes to talk about stuff. Then you're out the door. You can stay longer if you want, but we wanted to streamline it, especially in the Army, because you don't want to go over an hour. Actually, 50 minutes is typically an hour in the Army, but we wanted to streamline it. And then in 2019, at the very end of 2019, we finally felt released to let it out to the church. So now it's on our website, and it's streaming content that's donation-based, and that's the only way we can do it to stay legal with regard to fair use copyright law. Yeah. So what we did, long story short, is we went everywhere the movies were filmed. So the first episode is We Were Soldiers. So we filmed that on Doughboy Field and on the paratrooper jump towers at Fort Benning in Georgia, which is where the 1st Battalion 7th started in 1965. If you haven't seen that movie, you need to. The second one is Forrest Gump. We filmed that on the deck of a shrimp boat in Biola Battery, Alabama. That's great. And then the third episode is Top Gun. You Never Leave Your Wingman. Mm-hmm. We filmed that on the deck of the Yorktown with an F-14 right behind me, some of it in the cockpit, some of it on the bridge, some of it down on the flight deck, and some of it down in the hangar bay of the aircraft carrier. Then the fourth episode is Facing the Giants. If you haven't seen that one, another one that you need to see. Yep. Filmed that all at Sherwood Christian Academy inside the school. They closed the school down. They closed half the school for us to film. And then I filmed the majority of it out in the end zone because it's the death crawl scene. Yeah. And then the fifth episode is Rudy, which is all filmed inside the game day locker room at Notre Dame and all over the football field and everywhere. We got Touchdown Jesus in the background. That's actually what they call him. Yeah. And then sixth episode is Walk the Line, where we filmed part of that. The speaking part is filmed at Sun Studio in Memphis, Tennessee, where Johnny Cash recorded his first music. Walk the Line is the Johnny Cash biopic. And then part of it at his boyhood home and in the cotton fields of Dyess, Arkansas, which is where he was raised. Seventh episode is Saving Private Ryan. Obviously, if you're going to film Saving Private Ryan, it starts out I'm standing on a Nazi bunker on Omaha Beach on the north coast of France. And then it concludes with me in the American cemetery above Omaha Beach in Normandy, France. And then the last episode is Armageddon, because if I don't have at least one Bruce Willis movie, I'm falling down on the job.
He's my asteroid. You did it.
He's my man crush. The dude's my man crush, right? I mean, he killed 30 terrorists in the Nakatomi Tower with bare feet and a borrowed machine gun, right? We did Armageddon because it's got a great, there's a great story about, how it doesn't matter how we start, only matters how we finish. The guy's got 30 seconds to talk to his daughter and unsay all the terrible things he'd said. And it's really cool the way it all plays out. But we filmed most of that on the floor of Mission Control in Houston, Texas. And then the latter part of it, we filmed on Pad 39A, which is where the Challenger and Apollo 11 and everybody is launched at Cape Canaveral. And some of it inside the vehicle assembly building, and which is that big building with the flag on the side that they used to put the rockets in. Yeah. And in launch control. So we were in launch control. We were all over the place for that. We filmed some of them in 2 different spots. Actually, now that I think about it, we filmed part of the Forrest Gump episode in Savannah, Georgia, on the same road that he ran down with the oak trees and everything else. So it's a lot of fun. And we got guys in every English speaking country you can think of. that use it. Right now it's $6, a $6 donation. You can try it for a week. You can find it on our website, roughcutmen.org, and then click on the video series tab and it'll walk you through it. And then if you want to lead your guys through it, it's $99 and you get it for 6 months and you can use it as much as you want. You can print the PDF facilitator's guide. You can lead as many groups as you want through it. And I think over time, eventually we're going to give the whole thing back to God. And I keep feeling led to make it $6 because I have to charge something for it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool that it's who has your six, and we'll make it $6.
Yeah.
Because we're a ministry who survived 2020. I used to tell people that God's our provider, but in the background, I used to tell my wife, if I'm not speaking, we're not eating. 95% of our income came from resources and back of room and speaking, all of which got cut off in 2020. Yet we ended up going into 2021 in better shape financially than we went into 2020. So God provided and got us through what killed a lot of ministries, to be completely honest. God got us through it. So we're fully intending on giving as much back as we can. We're a ministry first. God, I haven't missed a meal. So I'm not nearly as concerned about money as I am reaching into to reaching as many men as I can before the Lord takes me home.
Yeah. Amen, brother. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. We'll have links to all the things that you talked about on the website there. And David, just best of luck, man, with your ministry. I hope to stay in touch. And look, if you ever come to Charlotte or if you're in the North Carolina area, let me know. I'll come check you out at some kind of event.
Oh man, I'm up and down Charlotte all the time.
Oh,
and
good.
My son and his wife live in Travelers Rest, which is a couple hours south of you.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'll definitely keep that in mind because I'm about due for a road trip anyway.
I think we're all feeling a little bit of the itch these days. So
yeah, man.
All right. I appreciate you.
Thanks,
David.
Mike.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.